Dear friends, welcome to this important discussion on the Quran, Sharia, and the law. I am Faiz Rahman, Secretary General of Islamic Forum for the Promotion of Moderate Thought, and our forum basically is a forum which intellectually counters extremism in society across the board, whether it is Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, or Christian. But since we are Muslims and Islamic Forum, we try to focus on the Muslim side more than the other religious extremism. So we have been regularly holding this kind of meetings even before the lockdown for the past several years. We hold seminars and other discussions, and I myself write in the newspapers on Islam, clarifying issues on religion and law. And my association with Arif Saab has been for a long time now, and I really appreciate his scholarship on the Quran. And he's not just a top Quranic scholar, but also a great thinker on Islam. So, as part of our discourse on religion, where we try to bring alternative interpretation of Islam and the Quran to what already exists in society, in Muslim society. So we have been regularly inviting. So as part of this endeavor, we have requested Arif Ahmad Khan Saab, the Honorable Governor of Kerala, to join us and discuss on Quran, Sharia, and the law, because there seems a lot of confusion. A lot of people actually interchange these terms, and they try to equate the Sharia with the Quran and Quran with the Sharia, and then the whole thing as the law that we need to practice or in Islam. So Arif Saab would clarify on these terms, thanks to his immense scholarship on this subject. And as you all know, Arif Saab deserves no introduction. He has never minced words, and he has never shied away from boldly putting out his views. And as you all know, he was one of the persons, one of the first persons among the Muslims to voice his support for the judgment on Shah Banu, which was which was nothing political about it. It was a decision of the Quran with the judge. The judge, of course, the Supreme Court actually quoted the Quran, but unfortunately, the Muslim clergy differed, and then we had another law. And Arif Saab was bold enough to, at the time, resign from the Rajiv Gandhi cabinet, and of course, for which he received a lot of flack. But then he also received a lot of support for his bold decision. So he needs no introduction. The person who has spoken his mind, a person who has stood for values. I will just, although it needs no introduction, I will briefly read out a short introduction of him. But before I do, क्या आरिफ साहब?
मैंने कहा आपने करा दिया इंट्रोड्यूस, अब और क्या?
नहीं, थोड़ा मैं पढ़ लेता हूँ आपसे। राजभवन के वेबसाइट में जो छोटा सा दिया हुआ है वो पढ़ ही लेता हूँ। Or before I do that, I would like to, my request to participants would be, this discussion is not a political discussion. This is purely an Islamic discussion. Arif Saab is speaking as a Muslim scholar here. He happens to be a governor. This is a different matter. So the discussion is purely on Islam. The questions will relate only to Islam and the topic the Governor Saab speaks on. And the questions have to be polite and put in a very civil way. Any kind of rudeness displayed in terms of expressing the questions, whether it's in the chat box or by voicing the opinion, is not acceptable. I mean, we are a moderate forum. We believe in moderation. We believe in civil discourse. So my humble request to all participants to remain within these free speech limits, because free speech doesn't entail us to abuse anybody or to disagree in a harsh way. So therefore, we would request them. Otherwise, we may be forced to ask them to leave the meeting, or maybe eject them ourselves. So therefore, with this small request, I'd like to now introduce my good friend Arif Ahmad Khan Sahib, the Honorable Governor of Kerala. Shri Arif Ahmad Khan Sahib was born on the 7th of December 1951 in Bulandshahr, Uttar Pradesh. He received his BA honors from the Aligarh Muslim University in 1972-73 and LLB from the Lucknow University, UP, in 1977. He started his political career as a student leader and led the Aligarh Muslim University Students Union as General Secretary during the 1972-73 and the President during 1973-74. He became member of the Legislative Assembly of Uttar Pradesh in 1971 at the age of 26 from the Siana constituency in Bulandshahr. Arif Saab was elected to the 7th Lok Sabha from Kanpur in 1980. He was again elected as a member of the parliament from the Bahraich constituency during the 8th, 9th and 12th Lok Sabha. Arif Saab's administrative capabilities were nationally noted during the ministerial tenures. As Union Cabinet Minister, Arif Ahmad Khan Saab held the portfolios of energy, civil aviation during 1989-90. Earlier, he had also served as Deputy Minister, Information and Broadcasting 1982-83 and Union Minister of State, holding portfolios such as Agriculture 83-84, Energy 84 and 85-86, Industry and Company Affairs 84-85 and Home Affairs 1985. Arif Saab was also a member of the Kendriya Hindi Samiti during 1980-82. As a member of Parliament, he worked on the Parliamentary Committee on Public Undertakings, Home Affairs and Foreign Affairs. Arif Saab is also the author of a very interesting book on Islam, which I have read. I can vouch for its wonderful scholarship. It's called The Text and Context, Quran and Contemporary Challenges. It was published in 2010. He's also a very well-known writer and columnist on various matters, including religious reforms. A voracious reader, his lectures on various topics are very popular among universities and other audiences across the country. Arif Saab has traveled extensively and has led Indian delegation to the Non-Aligned Information Ministers Conference in 1982 and to the World Economic Forum, Switzerland in 1990. He was also a member of the Indian Parliamentary Delegation to the 100th IPU Conference in Moscow in 1998. During 1990, as Union Civil Aviation Minister, Arif Ahmad Khan Saab had played a very vital role in evacuating the Indian immigrants stranded in Kuwait. He is married to Srimati Reshma Arif, and they have two sons, Shri Mustafa Arif, who is an advocate, and Shri Kabir Arif, a pilot by training and currently pursuing his passion of organic farming in Uttar Pradesh. So Arif Saab was the governor of Kerala, this 22nd governor of Kerala on the 6th of September 2019. And with this brief introduction, I now request Arif Saab to take over and give us I think he will be speaking as agreed earlier. He will be speaking for 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes we will open up the meeting is till 1:30. After 30 minutes of Arif Saab's speech, the meeting will be open till we end at 1:30 p.m. Thank you so much. Welcome Arif Saab to our forum.
Faisal, thank you very much. My gratitude for your invite and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with the members of the moderate group, which is a very active group, and you have already outlined its objectives. Before I start speaking, and I hope I take not really 30 minutes, I will try. I will enjoy more if this session is more interactive rather than a monologue.
Yes.
But I will start with a sentence which I often heard, few meetings which I attended, of Maulana Abdul Karim Parikh.
Okay.
Although on the question of Shah Bano, we were on the opposite sides, but he was a scholar.
Yeah.
And I heard him in a beginning of every speech, he will say, he will remind his audience, and he will assert that religion is not my profession. By profession, I am a trader. Likewise, I will say that I am speaking here, you are very kind, you have referred to me as a scholar, but I consider myself a student, a very humble student, and who one of the sentences which has left a very lasting imprint on my mind has been said by Martin Luther King Jr. He said, when this protest movement was going on, he said, all we ask America is to be true to what you say on paper. In fact, you have used the word of alternative interpretation.
Yeah.
I strongly feel that even an alternative interpretation is not needed. Things can improve dramatically if the distortions which have crept into the Islamic worldview in the name of, actually it is law, but popularly they call it Sharia. So if these distortions are taken care of, then I think more than 90% of the problem will be over. Secondly, my attitude is also guided by what has been said by Huzur Sallam, that al-hikmatu zallatil mu'min fahuwa haysu wajadaha fahuwa ahaqqu biha. The word of wisdom is the lost property of a believer. Wherever you find it, claim it as a matter of right. So, in fact, this is such a profound statement. Once we internalize the spirit of this message, then all these divisions, Muslim scholar, Hindu scholar, Christian scholar, all these will go away. Scholarship is scholarship. Scholarship can be about a particular religious tradition, but scholarship is scholarship. Huzur Sallam has said, "Utlubul ilma law kana bisin." He exhorted the believers that to seek knowledge, even if you have to travel to China, which means that real scholarship. Scholarship can be of a particular subject, of a particular tradition. So I will try to see this question of Shariat and law in the light, mostly in the light of Quran. But as Huzur Sallam himself has said, that whenever you hear anything attributed to me, place it before Quran. If it accords with Quran, accept it. If it does not accord with Quran, then reject it. So I am also going to use few narrations apart from Quranic verses, but I have taken care that these narrations convey the same message or same spirit as is conveyed by the verses of Quran. Many a times, and I have faced this situation since 1986, when I had quoted profusely from Quran and Hadith, and nobody ever questioned the authenticity of the quotations, but the question they raised was that Arif Muhammad Khan has not been trained in a madrasa, he does not sport a beard, therefore what right he has to quote Quran? No, I do not agree with that. And I'm going to quote from Quran, I'm going to quote few references to Ahadith Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So actually this confusion is created because an impression has been created as if it is not for everybody or any person to understand, to be able to understand the meaning of the Quran. And therefore, for a long period of time, Muslims in India were advised by people especially belonging to the madrasas like Deoband or even Nadwa, they were told not even to read the translation of the Quranic verses. And their insistence was that this may mislead you because you won't be able to understand the meaning. But this is one viewpoint. The Quranic viewpoint is totally different. Quran emphatically says, why I'm saying emphatically? Because the verse I'm going to quote has been repeated 7 times in one chapter. And it is وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And we have indeed made the Quran easy to understand. And remember, zikr. Then is there any that will receive admonition? And even at the cost of repetition, I'm saying that it has been, this point has been greatly emphasized because same words have been repeated in 7 verses. Then further Quran says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not then earnestly seek to understand the Quran, or their hearts are locked up by them? So, Quran, talking about itself, not only says that the book has been made easy to understand, but it exhorts the believers to apply their mind, to meditate, to reflect, to think about the meaning and import of the verses of the Quran. For us, it is also important to understand, try to understand the book, because after the death of Huzur Sallam, somebody asked Hazrat Aisha, his wife, Ya Ummul Mu'mineen, Ma kana khuluqur Rasulullah. What kind of conduct was that of Huzur Sallam? And Hazrat Aisha replied, Alasta taqra'ul Quran. Do you not read Quran? فَإِنَّا خُلُقَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ كَانَ الْقُرْآنِ. His conduct was, if you read Quran, then you will know without having seen him what was his conduct, what was his demeanor, how he behaved with the people. So if we want to, now we have many books and many people who tell us what Huzur Sallam said at a given time on some particular occasions. But Quran is a book which, according to Hazrat Aisha, tells us what Huzur Sallam did during his lifetime. It describes, from the verses we can make out what his action was, because one of the verses of the Quran says that I am the first to, this is the book of God, and I am the first to submit to it. Submission means that to be in accordance with the provisions of the book. So this part is very important. Now there is a lot of confusion because the law which has been compiled during the period of Muslim Empire, and I want to underline the term Muslim Empire. The laws were framed by individuals during the period of Muslim Empire. The Muslims, by their own admission, they considered first 30 years as the period of rightly guided caliphs. These laws were not framed. These books had not come into existence either during the time of Huzur Sallam or during the first 30 years. These books of law came into existence much, much later. When the Muslim empire was at its zenith, at that point of time, these books have come into existence. But in order to make them more credible and to validate them, the term Shariat was used. Whereas Quran clearly says any rule or law framed by any human being, howsoever learned that person may be, does not come in the category of Shariat. Shariat, Quran says, Summa ja'alnaka ala shari'atin min al-amri fattabiha. Quran is saying to Huzur Sallam that then we put you on the right way of religion. So follow you that way and follow not the wala tattabi ahwa allazina la ya'lamun, and follow not the ways of those who do not know things. Why? There may be scholars, people who know things, but still, except the person who is blessed with revelation, any other person, howsoever intelligent and wise that person may be, he is bound by his own experience, his own knowledge, the time in which that person is living. Therefore, Quran is making it absolutely clear that Quran itself is Shariat. The laws which are written in the light, even in the light of the Quranic verses, if the laws, because you need laws keep changing. The book does not change. So the laws, in responding to the new times, new challenges, new exigencies, those who are blessed with wisdom, those who are entrusted with the task, they will frame rules. But these rules will be called fiqh, or the laws they make will be called fiqh. As far as Shariat is concerned, Shariat absolutely, and it is also important. It is also important to remember that the root word of Shara has been used in Quran only 4 times. And word Shariat has been used only 1 time. And the meaning of Shariat there is Likulli ja'alna minkum shir'atan wa minhaja. And for each one of you, we have made a law and an open way. So the laws, divine laws, are the laws of nature. And there is nobody in this world who can defy the laws of nature. He can be familiar with the laws of nature, and he can use through that knowledge. Person may use, as we are seeing these days, the mobile that we use, the process through which the sound travels, that has not been created by man. Man has acquired the knowledge how the sound travels, and they have used that natural phenomena to their advantage. And likewise, Quran has several verses, not one, several verses where Quran repeatedly says, "Ittabi'u ma unzila ilaykum min rabbikum wa la tattabi'u min dunihi awliya qalilan ma tazakkarun." Follow the revelation given unto you from your Lord, and follow not the awliyas, friends and protectors, other than him. So likewise, so many places it has been, and repeatedly Quran says that as far as hukum is concerned, now hukum is command, hukum is judgment. Repeatedly, Quran says that Allah does not share, God does not share this power with anyone. La yushrik fi hukman. There is no one, no human being shares that power with God. And we must also, because in fact, I have already said that I speak on these subjects as a student, but I'm amazed that Quran has sort of visualized how attempts will be made to use Quran to pursue worldly desires or worldly gains. And for that, Quran says that on the day of judgment, the Prophet Huzur Sallallahu will complain to God. وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّا قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Now this is a very important verse. Who are these people who have reduced Quran into a book which is mahjur? Mahjur in Arabic means somebody who, the big size animal, when the animal is slaughtered, then all four legs are tied down, and animal is brought down for the slaughter. That state of the animal is called halate mahjuri. Here, Quran itself is saying that my people will reduce this book into a halat of mahjuri. How this thing can happen? This thing can happen only if we try to use the authority of the Quran, the authenticity of the Quran, the validity of Quran to pursue things for which they are not meant. And not only one verse, there is another verse which says, Allazina ja'alul Qur'ana idina, and they have made Quran into shreds. So this was actually a warning that these attempts will be made. I have brought these verses, I have mentioned them only to tell you, to give my viewpoint, that when the man-made laws are presented as Shariat. Shariat is something which comes from divine source. It does not come from human beings. What comes from human beings is the product of their intellect, product of their wisdom, and that in Arabic is called fiqh. That is not Shariat. Shariat is something definite which has been revealed to the messenger. On the other hand, law is something which, in response to the situation in which you are living, the times in which you are living, the needs you are facing, then the wise men, the intelligent men, they gather together and they, in the light of the basic principles which come from the book, because this is important to understand. Not only I'm not generally speaking. I will quote from Mujalla, the book of Islamic jurisprudence. Now, book of Islamic jurisprudence says, La yunkiru taghayyar al-ahkami bi taghayyir al-zaman wa bi taghayyir al-amkanati wal-ahwal. Meaning, it is an indisputable fact that with the change of times, the law or the commands also undergo change. This is not, I'm not reading you out a jurisprudential principle from some common law book. This is from Mujalla, the book on Islamic jurisprudence. Further, it says that the rules change when there is change of residence or status. So, but law is subject to social context and social conditions, the times under which you are living. The book of God is not subject to change. So how the two terms can be equated? To my mind, this is totally unfair to use the term Sharia for the laws which have been written by individuals. Undoubtedly, there were many of them who were very wise, very pious, very intelligent, but Quran does not recognize a rule written by a human being, howsoever intelligent or wise that person may be, as Sharia. Quran recognizes Sharia. Quran recognizes Quran as Sharia, not something which has been said by somebody in the light, even in the light of the book. Book itself is Sharia. And there is another very important, to my mind, it's very important because the Christian worldview, the basic defect of human beings is the original sin committed by their ancestor. In the Islamic worldview is that human nature is neglectful nature. So the more than being informed, human beings need to be reminded. And that is why Quran so profusely uses the word of zikr to remind, to call to mind. And there is one verse in the Quran which I think on this matter is very enlightening. It says, Alam ya'ni lilladhina amanu an takhsha'a qulubuhum li zikrillahi wa ma nazala min al-haq. ولا يكونوا كالذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبل فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون. Has the time not come for those who believe for the believers that their hearts in all humility should engage in the remembrance of God and of the truth which has been revealed to them, and they should not know. This is very important because a principle has been outlined here, very important principle, and which is Wala yakunu kallazina utul kitab, do not become like those who were given book earlier. Then ages passed over them, and then their hearts were hardened. Which means that even a revolutionary message, a dynamic message, is reduced into customs and rituals after a certain period of time. And its dynamism and its spirit is ignored. And the human beings have this tendency that they try to cling to the form and they ignore the spirit and the message of the dynamism of that message. And the Quran again, there is another verse I would like to refer to. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasula wa ulil amri minkum. Fa in tanazatum fi shay'in farudduhu ila Allahi wa Rasuli in kuntum tu'minuna billahi wal yawmil akhir. We have been told to obey God, to obey Huzur Sallam, and also obey those who are in authority. Ulil amri minkum, those who are in authority. But there is there is a verse in the Holy Quran and there is a hadith also, that this obedience of the human beings is in doing good, not in committing sin. Ta'awanu alal birri
wa taqwa.
हाँ, and उद्वान में दुश्मनी करने में, in order to pursue enmity, do not cooperate.
Birri, yes.
So Quran clearly says that itaat मासियत में नहीं है. Obedience is not in following somebody who is doing a sin or helping him. There the question of obedience does not come. And then this particular verse, I would like the distinguished gathering which were there, I would like to draw their attention. 39, chapter 39, 18, and I find this very important. It has been said, Allazina yastami'una al-qawla fayattabi'una ahsana. Ulaika allazina hadahumullah wa ulaika hum ulul albab. Believer, the quality of the believer has been described that they listen to the words of Allah and follow that which is best in that. Now, how can we make this distinction? Is there anything which is not ahsan therein? No, it is not. That is not meant by the verse. What is meant by the verse is exactly in accordance with the exhortations where we are asked to reflect, to think, to apply our mind to the verses of Allah. Here what is being said is that the reflection is for the purpose of finding solution for the problems which you are facing at a given time. It does not mean that something is ahsan and something is not ahsan. Everything is ahsan. But in particular situation, everything will not apply. And for that purpose, you have to apply your mind. You have to reflect. You have to reason out. So I feel that this verse particularly, and there are 4 or 3 verses in Quran on the same subject. Then I come to, I think I have already taken about 20 minutes. How much time I have taken, Professor?
Arif sir, you can continue, no problem. If you have to, I mean, you can finish your.
I will just take 10 minutes and then we will have the.
Yeah.
You know.
Please go ahead. Yes.
And when we discuss Shariat and law in the context of Quran, we must not forget that Quran was revealed to a people which was totally a tribal society. And they lived in the neighborhood of great kingdoms. Sassanid Empire was there, Byzantine Empire was there, the long history of the kings in Yemen was there, Jerusalem was there, even Abyssinia was close by. But these people to whom Quran was revealed, or Quran was revealed in this setting, these people, they were purely a tribal society. They, for instance, I will give you just one example. For instance, the term Ahle Kitab has not been used by the Quran for the first time. Arabs used to refer to Jews and Christians as Ahle Kitab because Arabs were aware that they are advanced people, they have education, they have knowledge. In fact, if you read Bukhari, then you will find that in Medina there were big institutions which were run by Jews and they were called Midrash. The term Madrasa has come from Midrash. Midrash were the institutions which were run by the Jewish community. And we have references there in the Bukhari where even in the case where Jews had come complaining about, they had reported a case about adultery, illicit sex. Huzur Sallallahu did not give the judgment. When matter was reported to him, he walked with them to their institution. And there he asked, what is the punishment provided in Torah? And the term used there is Midrash. As I said, the term Madrasa has come from Midrash. So the Arabs had a fascination, absolute fascination for kingship. The kingship was absent in their society. They were a tribal society with heightened sense of equality. But still they were fascinated by the kingship. And why I'm saying so? Because on the eve of the takeover of Makkah by Huzur Sallallahu, the Sirat books have reported a conversation between Abu Sufyan and Ibn Abbas. No, Abu Sufyan and Abbas, uncle of Huzur Sallallahu. Abu Sufyan tells when he sees this large number of people who had come with the Huzur Sallallahu, then he says, and he was taken to a hilltop. And that's a very interesting story. I'm sure you must have read it, where Huzur Sallallahu asked those who had come with him to spread out and cook their food after the sunset, so that they will look the number will look even larger than actually it was. And then Hazrat Abbas took Abu Sufyan to a hilltop. From there he saw it. And then he says to Hazrat Abbas, لَقَدْ أَصْبَحَ مُلْكِ ابْنِ أَخِيكَ عَظِيمُهَا. He said that the kingdom of your nephew has become really great. And Hazrat Abbas responded by saying, Laisa bimulki innama hazihi nabuwwat. This is not kingdom, this is prophethood. Now, this is a very profound statement. Very profound statement. Like the whole banyan, huge banyan tree is hidden inside a small seed. This is a very profound statement, because kingship is about desire for power and personal aggrandizement and submission to the king by the people. On the other hand, prophethood is about submission to none other than one God, which logically means submission to one God, logically means inherent equality and dignity of mankind. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. Quran says, and we have honored the children of Adam with dignity and dignity and honor. So, Nabuwwat is not about kingship. We come to, there is a hadith. Why I'm saying that the mission of the prophet is not to establish a state and frame body of laws. Mission of the prophet is transformation of the mind and soul, to teach book, wisdom, and to sanctify them. What وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. What yuzakkihim means? The education leads to knowledge. Knowledge leads to wisdom. And it is wisdom which empowers you to make right choice between 2, 3, or 4, or 5 equally valid propositions. That is wisdom. Wisdom enables you. And when you acquire that ability, that is really what is called yuzakki. When you have acquired that wisdom, which enables you to make right choice between not just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equally valid propositions. That is yuzakki. So here, this hadith says that the angel tells Huzur Sallallahu, Ya Muhammad, Inna Allaha Azza Jalla yukhayyiruka baina an takuna nabiyan abdan aw nabiyan malika. The angel tells the prophet, and never forget that Huzur Sallallahu Arabian Peninsula was in the neighborhood of Jerusalem, in the neighborhood of Jews. And Jews had this great tradition, even Quran talks about it, where many of the prophets were at the same time kings. So here the offer is being made to Holy Prophet that God has given you an option to choose between being messenger and devotee of God, or messenger and king of the dominion. Huzur Sallam, the hadith says that this question was posed by an angel who had come with Hazrat Jibreel. Huzur Sallam had looked at Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam, and Huzur Sallam said, Bala, bal, indeed, bal, Nabiyan Abdan. I choose to be messenger, prophet, and devotee of God, not king of the dominion. And then Quran itself says, Nahnu alamu bima yaquluna, chapter 50, ayat 45. Nahnu alamu bima yaquluna. We know best what they say. Wama anta alayhim bijabbar. And you are not one translation here is you are not to overawe them by force, but in classic Arabic, Jabbar is a term which is used for the kings, because force can be used by kings legally. Illegally, it can be used by anybody, but legally, institutionally, force is used by kings, and in classic Arabic, Jabbar means king. So, Vama anta alayhim bi Jabbar. Now, instead of translating, I am saying, and we have not made you a Jabbar. Fazakir bil Qur'ani man yakhafu wa'id. So, admonish them with the Quran such as fear my warning. And then I will refer to another verse of the Quran, which makes it even more crystal clear. Quran says, Tilkat law is needed to run the government. You want to form the government, you want to because you wish to dominate over others. And the view of the Quran is, Tilkat darul akhiratu naj'aluha lillazina la yuriduna uluwan fil ardi wala fasadan wal aqibatul lil muttaqin. And the home of the hereafter is only for those who seek not domination in the land, who do not want to dominate over others, nor they create mischief. And the end is best for the righteous. The whole book of the Quran starts, Zalikal Kitabu la rayba fihi hudal lil muttaqin. This book is for those who are God conscious. The purpose of Islam is to transform the individual into a God conscious person, muttaqi. Islam is a religion of taqwa. Islam is not a religion of fatwa. It's a religion of taqwa. Then we must also have a look, because there is another verse in the Quran which clearly makes a distinction between religion and worldly affairs. And not one verse, several verses, where Quran, I'm talking to this group who are familiar with the book, where it repeatedly says that they seek to the term yashtaruna has been used, that They
يشتروا به ثمنا قليلا.
absolutely Samanan Qalila, where they use the verses of the holy book in order to make some paltry gains.
Yeah.
Quran decries that attitude, but Quran recommends an attitude. And what is that attitude that is recommended by Quran? The attitude which is recommended by Quran is وَابْتَغِي فِي مَا أَتَاكَ اللَّهُ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ وَلَا تَنْسِ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. And use your worldly wealth. Use your worldly wealth to seek the home of the hereafter. And do not forget your own share in it. You also enjoy, but use your wealth in the way of Allah. That alone can, to seeking worldly gains in the name of the book or religion is decried. Using worldly wealth to promote the prospects of the hereafter is recommended. Inna dunya mazra'atul akhirat. There is a prophetic narration. Inna dunya mazra'atul akhirat. This is the field for the hereafter. Whatever you will sow here, you will receive it there. And then finally, with this, I will conclude my remarks that we must also be careful when we discuss these subjects. We must be careful as to how the Quran perceives the mission, the prophetic mission of Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Quran, at least in 4 ayahs, Quran clearly says that the purpose of the mission of the Holy Prophet is وَيُعَلِّمُ رَبَّنَا وَابْعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِكَ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ. This is the prayer of Hazrat Ibrahim. He is not Hazrat Ibrahim's progeny from Isaac. They had many prophet kings, but in this prayer, this invocation, Hazrat Ibrahim is praying to God that send a prophet among them who teaches them the book, wisdom, and sanctifies them. Likewise, in 348, same thing has been said about Hazrat Isa, Jesus Christ. Then 3.164, again same thing. وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Then 62.2, again same. يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ وَيُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةَ. Nowhere in Quran, Huzur Sallallahu has been given the task to build a dominion, an empire. We must remember that in 7th century, 6th century, there was no concept of nation state. There were empires, kingships, or tribal societies. So nowhere, in fact, I was listening to a very leading scholar, international scholar, and in his talk he said that Huzur Sallallahu has used 2 words for the state. And what are those 2 words? Sultan and Al-Jamaat. Now even there is no word. Suppose laws are needed for a state. Now if the concept of a state is not there, what the concept is that of taqwa, because taqwa is one quality where you may be in any position, you may be in any calling, you may be anywhere, but if you are a God-conscious man, then whether you are in government, you will not cross your limits. You are in police, you will not cross your limits. You are a scholar, you will not exploit your position. You may be a doctor, you may be a nurse, you may be an engineer, you may be anything. If that God consciousness is there, then you will try to do your duties truthfully, sincerely, and will never try to exploit anybody. whereas governments formed in the name of any philosophy and any religion, read the history of these governments. Not everybody is not alive, but there is no dearth of person who abuse the powers which come to them when they are holding government position. And it is for running the state that the law is needed. But with one more verse, two more verses, I will conclude my remarks among the part of the prophetic mission, where 33.35 says, Ya Yuhan Nabi inna arsalnaka shahidan wa mubashiran wa nazir. Apart from being Bashir and Nazir, Bashir is one, if you do right, then you will be rewarded. Nazir is to warn them. If you do wrong, then you will have to suffer the consequences. And then here one more word has been used, and that is Shahid, to be witness. Now, this is a very profound word. Witness, there are qualifications for a witness. Qualifications of witness, one of the basic qualifications of the witness is that he must live a truthful life. Otherwise, the evidence will not be accepted. So, here one additional feature has been included in the mission of the Prophet. And then finally, in 7.157, Quran says, وَيَدَا أَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ, and to liberate the mankind from heavy burdens and the chains which they are wearing. La ruhbaniyat fi Islam, there is a hadith. Actually, there was no concept of middleman in Islam. This is part of the mission of the Prophet to release mankind, and all traditional commentators have said that this particular line refers to the stranglehold of the Jewish and Christian clergy. But outside Jewish and Christian clergy, in Islam or in any other religious tradition, if those who call themselves, who are, when I'm using term clergy, I use term clergy not for the scholars, but for those who make scholarship of religion their profession. Because Quran repeatedly says that on imparting religious instructions, no reward is only from God. You cannot expect any reward from human beings. Because if you are accepting reward from human beings, then you become obliged to them. You become indebted to them. And that indebtedness, that obligation becomes an obstacle in speaking truth. Therefore, Quran repeatedly, not only Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, as'alukum alayhi ajran, मैं इस कार्य नबुव्वत के लिए, for this work as prophet, what I am teaching you, I do not seek any reward from you. إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. The only reward I seek is to have feelings of affection and love for those who are close to me, who are my kith and kin. That is the only thing. But this is a sentence which Quran has been used not only in the context of the Holy Prophet, but in the context of almost all the earlier prophets who have been mentioned in Quran. So this is very important. Now, who has, let me at the end also make one clarification. Because here in India, the majority is of those who subscribe to the Hanfi school of thought. But admittedly, we do not have any writing material from Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Abu Hanifa was an exemplary. He was not only intelligent, he was not only wise, he was a very rich man, he was a trader. He used to spend money on the scholars who received education from him, particularly or those students who came from very poor background and their parents wanted to withdraw the children so that they can help them in earning livelihood. Imam Abu Hanifa used to take care of even his family. He was such a pious man. You can refer to many books where you will see how fair his practices were in his business and in his trade, where if some defect was noticed in the commodity and that was not conveyed to the buyer, then he will return the full money. He was a very pious man. And that was the reason why Umayyads wanted to appropriate him. During the end of their term, they tried to appoint him as superintendent of the exchequer. He refused. Then the Abbasis wanted to appoint him as Qazi al-Qazat, Chief Justice. Mansur called him. The Umayyads also punished him for refusing to accept the position. But this was that the Umayyads were on their last leg. So that punishment did not last very long. But when the Abbasis came, Mansur called him, asked him to take over as Chief Justice. Why? Because these rulers had no credibility. Therefore, they wanted to include people who had credibility among the masses of their piety, of their knowledge, of their wisdom. Imam Abu Hanifa said to him, he said, no, I do not deserve this position. Mansur said, you are lying. Imam Abu Hanifa said, you have proved that what I am saying is right because you can't appoint a liar on the position of judge. Mansur felt so humiliated that he imprisoned him. And he used to receive lashes as punishment. He died on 11th day in the jail. And there is a famous sentence, first I will say in Urdu and then translate it in English. जिनको हम खलीफा कहते हैं, जिन हुकूमतों को इस्लामी हुकूमतें कहते हैं, इमाम अबू हनीफा ने उनके लिए कहा, ये फासिको फाजिर हुकूमतें हैं, इनके तहत ओहदा कबूल करना अपने ईमान का सौदा करना. These are wayward governments. To accept position under them amounts to compromising one's faith, one's convictions, one's belief. So Imam Abu Hanifa did not accept any position. He died in jail rather and refused to accept the position. But Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Malik, both of them who were the disciples of Imam Abu Hanifa, they accepted the positions. मैं जाऊंगा, I will not go into details, but आप तारीख़ खुलफा इमाम सुयूती की पढ़ लीजिए, and then you will know what kind of decisions were given by Imam. In fact, Maulana Azad has also referred in Tazkirah to these decisions, where when the caliph wanted to sleep with a slave girl, and the slave girl is telling him that I have slept with your father, and then he calls Abu Yusuf, and how Abu Yusuf provides hila to justify the caliph sleeping with this slave girl. And there are other instances also. So these are the people, Imam. Although we associate this law with the name of Imam Abu Hanifa, but these are mostly opinions of Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad and people who came later. And they came during the time of the rulers who were described by Imam Abu Hanifa as Fasiqo Fajir Hukumaten. Therefore, my point is that we do no service to Islam when we equate Shariat with law. Law, you are free to make any law. Because Huzur himself had predicted. He said, if that, I do not know about that hadith, but the famous hadith that my successor, the rightly guided will continue for 30 years. And after that, there will be oppressive kingship. So under the oppressive kingships, if you equate law, which has been made to suit the requirements of the empire, with Shariat, Shariat is Qanun. Shariat upholds dignity of mankind. Shariat upholds equality of human beings. Shariat upholds nobler values. Whereas the law, if I tell you This is time is not there, but if I quote from Hidayah, then you will see the only word which comes to my mind is enormity. The manner in which Quran has been distorted, Hadith have been fabricated to make laws which the requirements of the empire. Therefore, my point is that the claim may be there that these laws have been framed in accordance with the Quran. But the laws, every law, in fact, there is a hadith of Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Law comes much later. But even about hadith, Huzur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has said, Taksaru lakumul ahadith abadi. You will see abundance of ahadith after me. Whenever you hear anything, place it before the Quran. If you find it accords with the Quran, accept it. Otherwise, reject it. Likewise, we have every freedom. Something which is paraded out as Sharia, but which is actually opinion of the human beings. That is not Sharia, that is fiqh. But if it contradicts Quran, then we have every right to reject it. So there is a difference between the two. Quran itself is Sharia, whereas laws, which is fiqh, they are opinion of human beings, which certainly were conditioned by the times in which they were living, by their own knowledge, by their own experience. So it is very, very, to my mind, it is very, very unfair with law. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Arif Saab. That was a absolutely enlightening discourse on the ideas of Sharia and the law, and how do we equate it. In fact, we cannot equate it at all, as you rightly said. What goes in the name of Sharia is actually fiqh, and this fiqh is man-made, human-made, and therefore it has to be subservient to the word of Allah, that is the Quran. So I think that there can be no two views on that, no doubt about that at all. Unfortunately, today, everything is given the name of Islam on Sharia, and then people are made to follow it. In fact, the people sometimes are threatened to follow it. Like, as you rightly said, Imam Abu Hanifa was a great scholar and a great human being and a great Muslim. And unfortunately, he has not left any work, or any work has not survived. In fact, if you look at the recent judgment on triple talaq, the Muslim Personal Law Board's petition or a reply to the Supreme Court contained a clear statement which said that even on triple talaq, that it is valid instantly. That has not been said by Imam Abu Hanifa. The Muslim Personal Law Board conceded this in the Supreme Court. Not many of them know this. They said whatever is attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa has been attributed in the sayings of the disciples, Imam Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, like you rightly said. So directly, we don't have a single quote from Imam Abu Hanifa, even on the instant triple talaq. So unfortunately, but his name is actually being used as for the Hanafi fiqh. And if, as you rightly said, any fiqh that contradicts the Quran should not be acceptable to any person. And we have several sources of Islamic law. They say 4 sources, but whatever being the source of law, the original and the primary source of Islamic law, if at all, is the Quran, and all other sources are subservient to that. That is a very clear thing that has come out from your talk today. Thank you so much. And now